Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Grantharaj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Ki Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasa Tato Jayamudhirayet. Hare Krishna. So we're reading from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order, chapter 7. Chapter 7, Shloka 38. So the name of this chapter is The Sacrifice Performed by Daksha. Please repeat word by word. Yogeshwaram Uchuhu Preyan Nam Te Anyaham Asti Amutas Tvayi Prabho Vishvam Atmani Ikshin Nam Pritag Yam Atmanaham Atapi Bhaktyesham Tayopadham Avatam Ananyam Vrityam Anugrihanam Vatsalam Yogeshwara Uchuhu Preyannatinyosti Amutastvayi Prabho Vishvatmanikshinna Pritakya Atmanaham Atapi Bhaktyesha Tayo Padavatam Ananya Vrityanyugrihana Vatsalam Yogeshwara Uchuhu Preyannatinyosti Amutastvayi Prabho Vishvatmanikshinna Pritakya Atmanaham Atapi Bhaktyesha Tayo Padavatam Ananya Vrityaknu Grihana Vatsalam. Please. Yogeshwara Uchuhu Ladies? Ishvara Uchuhu. Anybody else? So, do word by word. Yoga Ishvaraham, the great mystics. Uchuhu said, Preyan, very dear. Nam, not. Te, of you. Anyaham, another. Asti, there is. Amutaham, from that. Tvayi, in you. Prabhu, dear Lord. Vishva Atmani, in the super soul of all living entities. Ikshet, I see, or see. Nam, not. Pritak, different. Yaham, who. Atmanaham, the living entities. Ata api, so much more. Bhaktya, with devotion. Isham, O Lord. Taya, with it. Upadhavatam, of those who worship. Ananyavritya, unfailing. Anugrihanam, favor. Vatsala, O favorable Lord. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrīla Prabhupada Ki Jai. The great mystics said, Dear Lord, persons who see you as non-different from themselves, knowing that you are the super soul of all living entities, are certainly very, very dear to you. You are very favorable towards those who engage in devotional service, accepting you as the Lord and themselves as their servants. By your mercy, you are always inclined in their favor. Purport. It is indicated in this verse that the monists and the great mystics know the Supreme Personality of Godhead as one. This oneness is not the misunderstanding that a living entity is equal in every respect to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This monism is based on pure knowledge as described and confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7.17. Priyo hi janani no tyartham aham sa cha mama priyaha. The Lord says that those who are advanced in transcendental knowledge and know the science of Krishna consciousness are very dear to Him, and He is also very dear to them. Those who are actually in perfect knowledge of the science of God know that the living entities are superior energy of the Supreme Lord. This is stated in the Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter. The material energy is inferior and the living entities are superior energy. Energy and the energetic are non-different. Therefore, energies possess the same quality as the energetic. Persons who are in full knowledge of the personality of Godhead, analyzing His different energies and knowing their own constitutional position, are certainly very, very dear to the Lord. Persons, however, who may not even be conversant with knowledge of the Supreme Personality, but who always think of the Lord with love and faith, feeling that He is great and that they are His parts and parcels, Persons, however, who may not even be conversant with knowledge of the Supreme Personality, but who always think of the Lord with love and faith, feeling that He is great and that they are His parts and parcels, ever His servitors, are even more favored by Him. The particular significance of this verse is that the Lord is addressed as Vatsala. Vatsala means always favorably disposed. The Lord's name is Bhaktavatsala. The Lord is famous as Bhaktavatsala, which means that He is always favorably inclined to the devotees, whereas He is never addressed anywhere in the Vedic literature as Jnani Vatsala. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanam Jnana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shriyuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopipakanta Radhakanta Namostute Jayatam Surato Pangur Mamamanda Matergati Matsarvasva Padambojo Radhamadana Mohano Divyat Vrindaranya Kalpadrumada Srimadratangara Simhasanasto Śrīmad-Radha Srila Govinda Devo Prashtalivi Savimano Smarami Śrīmandra Sarasaramvi Vamsiva Tatatastitaha Karshambeno Svanai Gopir Gopinatha Shriyestunaha Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishavano Sotadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Garadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Once again the verse. Yugeshvara Uchuhu Prayannatinyosti Amutastvayi Prabhu Vishvatmaknikshinna Pritakya Atmanaha Atapi Bhaktyesha Tayo Padhavatam Ananya Vitayanugruhana Vatsalam. The great mystics said, Dear Lord, persons who see you as non-different from themselves, knowing that you are the supersoul of all living entities, are certainly very, very dear to you. You are very favorable towards those who engage in devotional service, accepting you as the Lord and themselves as the servants. By your mercy, you are always inclined in their favor. Hare Krishna. So it's a very nice verse, very interesting verse also, because usually we might condemn anybody who thinks himself the same as the Lord, isn't it? Or not? What do you think? Björn is nodding with his head. Vedasara? And why is it demoniac? So if we are trying to usurp his position, or artificially thinking ourselves to be God, that's condemned, again and again. And sometimes, of course, like philosophically speaking, we sometimes called transcendentalists of people who have this attitude as Mayavadis. So a Mayavadi would be somebody who is convinced that everything material, everything that has form, everything that has shape, everything that has variety, color, expression, emotion, personality is Maya. And therefore, we try to negate all of that And the idea is once you negate all of that, you become one with everything, you become God. So what is the difference to what's being described here? Because here it says, the great mystics, Yogeshwaras, the great yogis and mystics, they're saying, Dear Lord, persons who see you as non-different from themselves, knowing that you are the super soul of all living entities, are certainly very, very dear to you. So here, those who think of themselves as non-different from the Lord are very dear. So what's the difference? What's the difference? Because on one side, we condemn those who think that they are God, or we condemn the idea, to become one with God even. We don't think it's aspirable. So why are those who think of themselves as equal, non-different, very dear? Any ideas? There was one little bit tricky sentence in there. I'll read it now, but Björn has some idea.
At first, the difference to the Mayavadis is that they don't make the offense to negate the position of the Lord. They accept him as the supreme still, and Mayavadis don't.
Mm-hmm. So there is a differentiation, which is often mentioned in the Bhagavatam by Srila Prabhupada, between a Brahmavadi and a Mayavadi. Mm-hmm. So in the Bhagavad Gita we will hear Brahma Bhuta Prasanatmana, Nasochati Nakangchati. So we need to realize Brahman in order to make spiritual progress. Actually having Brahman realization, understanding the unity of all energies, our spiritual nature, as equal to all living entities. From this results also the position of Samadharshinaha, that you're able to perceive each and every living entity as being equal, as being different from its body. So this perception of reality is actually considered to be the foundation for spiritual happiness. Brahma Bhuta. So you are a living entity in full realization, full consciousness that we are Brahman. We're all Brahman, we're all spirits. This is the foundation. And based on this foundation, we have the Brahmavadis. So the Brahmavadis are those who are very much focused on really discerning what is spiritual and what is material. Have a very clear perception of what is material energy, material elements, and what is spirit. And ultimately, of course, they realize that everything is spirit. Everything comes from Krishna. Everything comes from the Supreme Source, and therefore everything is spirit. So, but the Brahmavadis, you could say similar to the Mayavadis, don't have a clear conception or idea of who the personality of God it is, or who he is, or what he's doing, or how he is manifesting himself. But the difference is that the Brahmavadis, they are not offensive or especially envious. The Brahmavadis are unopinionated. The Mayavadis are very opinionated. They have a very strong idea, a very strong opinion about the Supreme. So you could say in one sense, there's this famous saying in English, if you think you're good, you can't get any better. So the Mayavadis are like that. They think they figured it all out. Whereas the Brahmavadis, they know, they have understood something, but they're open for more. They don't have an opinionated conclusion, an idea of how reality actually ultimately is. So there are two very famous examples of Brahmavadis in the Bhagavatam, the four Kumaras and Shukadeva Goswami. So the four Kumaras, four young boys, the first rishis, sages of the universe actually, mind-born sons of Brahma, reject the order of their father to populate the universe. So Brahma's duty is, he's a patriarch, he's a Prajapati, so his duty is to populate the entire universe. And his first 4 mind-born sons, means they're born from his mind, they're manifested. These 4 entities are so advanced that they immediately realize, you could say if you have a little bit knowledge, you can predict the future. Sometimes people are, if you have a very little knowledge, you're surprised how somebody can predict the future. It's like, this is a very famous cartoon, of course, somebody's sitting on a tree branch and he's cutting, the tree's there, the branch is here, and he's sitting there and he's cutting the branch, and somebody comes and tells him, be careful, you're gonna drop. Like, leave me alone. How can you tell the future? Nobody knows the future. It's like, be careful, And so he keeps going and he crashes down. It's like, how did you know? You're an astrologer, amazing. So if you have knowledge or if you have a bigger perspective, is to some extent you can predict the future. And of course there is the description of great rishis who are trikalagya. They have such a deep level of knowledge and understanding that they can literally see past, present and future. And it's not because they are, you could say, some magicians, or it's because they have a bigger perspective. Their scope is bigger. Now I lost my track. Give me a second. What was I saying before that? Brahmavadis, yes, the 4 Kumaras. So the 4 Kumaras, they are very, very powerful, and they immediately could see, this instruction our Father has given us a lot of trouble. They immediately realized it. They were very young children. They're young children. Very often, it's completely socially acceptable that they might be running around naked. So they're naked, they're not wearing anything, and they immediately realize, if we get to puberty, all these desires will come, all this entanglement, all these duties, all these fears, all these upadhis, all these attachments. And it's very visible in Daksha, because Daksha is a Prajapati. He's very powerful, has a great duty and responsibility in the universe, but he also became very proud, and got entangled, and made great offenses. So the 4 Kumaras were wise enough to immediately reject that trajectory for their lives. So they decided, dear Father, I'm sorry, but we will never become older than 5 years. We'll remain babies, we'll remain children, we'll remain innocent, and focus on the highest goal of life. Transcendence, Brahman. And then it is described that these 4 young boys, they had an instinct desire to meet Vishnu. And to make a long story short, ultimately when they smelled, it says they smelled the manjaris, the tulasis, on Krishna's feet, and when they smelled that, they fully became realized of Bhagavan. Until then, they were Yogeshwaras, you could say, great mystics. They thought of themselves as, non-different, from the transcendence, from the supreme, from the super soul. And they were very dear to the Lord. They were unopinionated, and they were ready and open to fully accept and surrender to the Supreme Lord, Bhagavan. Another interesting story in this connection is the story of Dhruva, which is going to be discussed now also in the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam. One of the most favored stories in the Bhagavatam from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is described that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had 2 favorite stories in the Bhagavatam. He relished again and again. And that's the story of Dhruva Maharaj and the story of Prahlad Maharaj. Two very amazing children. And so Dhruva, very determined young prince, his honor was scratched, he felt dishonored by his own father, and because he had a strong Kshatriya nature, he wanted to fight back, I'm going to have a bigger kingdom than my father. Singari Bhagwan ki jai. So he had this very clear goal that he wanted to have a bigger kingdom than his own father. And Uttanapada, who was his father, was one of the first kings, one of the first rulers, one of the first Chakravartis in Satya Yuga. So to have something bigger than his father, basically he had to become Brahma, or bigger than Brahma. But that was his goal. And he went to the forest, met Narada Muni. Narada Muni gave him the very powerful mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And he meditated, and he was able, within a very short time, to completely transcend the senses, control the senses, stopped eating, only sustained on water, then stopped drinking water, only sustained on prana, breathing, standing on one leg, very severe yoga, asana penance. And at one point he managed what is described in the Bhagavad Gita, to merge the prana and the apana. The inflowing air, prana, apana became one. And he completely controlled prana and apana to such a degree that the entire universe started suffocating. So powerful. And at that moment, you could say, and that all within half a year. So very fast also, within half a year, very determined. And then within his heart, he saw the super soul directly, and he completely immersed himself into that vision. He was so glad and happy and overwhelmed seeing the super soul in his heart, and he just felt accomplished. But then this vision within his heart disappeared. The vision within his heart disappeared, and then he opened his eyes to see Vishnu standing right in front of him. And then it was very different. So that's very interesting. Within his heart, he was completely happy. He was just like taking darshan, standing in front of Nrsimhadev. You take darshan, wow, such a nice dress, pink garland and yellow dress and big Shankha chakra. And you take darshan. And then imagine suddenly, Nrsimhadev stands up and looks at you. You're like, ah! So there's a difference between Paramatma realization and Bhagavan realization. So Paramatma realization is, in one sense, it is realized, and you understand yourself as a servant, you understand yourself as being of the same nature, we're both eternal, I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, and he's eternally the master. In that sense, we are non-different. We are eternal. But the moment the Lord starts manifesting his full form, Swarupa, as a person, then you realize you have to reciprocate. So Dhruva was very shocked. When within his heart he was completely pleased. When the Lord was standing in front of him, he was very confused. He didn't know what to do, how to react, and he knew he had to do something. He should offer prayers, for example. He tried to speak, but his voice choked, and he couldn't speak out of emotion and ecstasy, And then the Lord touched his head with his conch shell, and he was able to offer very, very beautiful prayers. So this is the difference between Paramatma realization and Bhagavan realization. Bhagavan is complete, to such a great extent, or a much greater extent, you might say, that somebody who is fully, realized, like a yogi, Yogeshvara, who realizes the nature of the super soul, when he is in front of the Lord directly, he doesn't know what to do. He has to start from the beginning again. to build up a relationship, a real personal relationship. So, yes, the 4 Kumaras are a very good example. Of course, Shukadeva Goswami is also not a very famous example of a Brahmavadi. He was born completely realized, that there's nothing to be involved in this world. He was so convinced about it that he didn't even want to come out of the womb, for many years. And only on the assurance of Krishna, he came out, only to straight away leave, So his mother didn't have a chance to nurse him like a baby, He was born and immediately he left to the forest, Very unique story. And Vyasadeva was trying to catch him, and there's a very, you could say, very interesting symptom, or you could say, you could call it a symptom of how somebody is perceived who is a Brahmavadi. So Shukadeva Goswami was, truly detached, truly within himself happy, Atmaram. Atmaram means a Brahmavadi is happy within himself. He doesn't need anything external to be happy. So he was so happy within himself and so at peace, you could also say, that when he passed a lake where young girls were taking bath, they were not disturbed at all. They just observed this amazing manifestation of this young, beautiful, naked boy running around. But they didn't feel any threat, they didn't feel any lust, they just, were amazed to see him. As opposed to when his father, Vyasadeva, who was running behind him, when he passed by, all the girls covered themselves. It is explained. So a Brahmavadi is somebody who's to such a level, you could say, transcendental, that nobody feels a threat, or a danger, or he doesn't create any material impulse. Is somebody beyond material needs, you could say. So Vyasadeva couldn't catch his young son, and realizing that he was, on such an elevated position, he realized the only way to attract his attention is by giving him a higher taste. Giving him the taste, or allowing him to relish the pastimes of Lord Krishna. So Vyasadeva devised a very simple plan. He sent his disciples out into the forest, and they were chanting very specific verses from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam describing Krishna's pastimes. And Shukadeva Goswami was somewhere in the forest, completely happy by himself, meditating, rejecting all the world, completely absorbed in Brahman. But the moment he heard these beautiful descriptions, his heart became agitated. It's like he was not at peace anymore. So he started breathing heavily. Manifesting different, forms of ecstasy. Why? Because somebody who's on such a level of Brahman realization, actually nothing material can allure him. He doesn't need anything. But if there is something that can allure him, then it is spiritual, completely spiritual. So in one sense, that's also a counter proof that the descriptions of the pastimes of Krishna are completely spiritual and not to be considered material. Many people make this mistake. They think, Krishna and the gopis, this is very mundane. Or if somebody is very not moral, he might think, I can also imitate that. Or if somebody is very moral, he might think, this is very immoral. How could you be God? So they get confused. But in reality, it is completely transcendental. So, and the proof is that somebody who is an Atmaram will be attracted by it, and has great respect for it. A very similar situation is there also in the Rajasuya Yajna of Yudhishthira Maharaj. All the kings are assembled to install Yudhishthira Maharaj as the emperor, as the Chakravarti, as the king of kings, the ruler of the planet, Rajasuya Yagna. And as part of the Rajasuya Yagna, the most honorable person should be worshipped by the king. So Yudhishthira Maharaja chooses Krishna. He chooses Krishna. And especially Shishupal, of course, we know the story. He didn't like it. He opposed Krishna being worshipped. But there's a, you could say, slightly bigger version of that story in the Bhagavatam, where Bhishma, is proposed. So we should worship Bhishma instead. Why Krishna? Krishna, he's not always very moral. Sometimes he might not fulfill his word, and he has a reputation of having so many women, and so many queens. So he doubted, they doubted, especially Shishupal doubted, the character of Krishna, and proposed better would be Bhishma actually, And Bhishma, of course, is known to be a great brahmachari, His name was originally Devavrata, and when he took this vow, he took the vow that I will never marry. He took this horrible vow, you could say, never to marry. And that especially is, you could say, tough, or because Bhishma also made another vow that he would never die until he saw somebody qualified on the throne of Hastinapur. So he lived for many generations, and never took the throne for himself. So Bhishma Dev, who was known and respected, he said, I vouch, the dealings of Krishna with the gopis is on a transcendental level. It's much better than my, renunciation, my brahmacharya. So basically Bhishma confirmed, somebody who was completely, self-controlled, disciplined. He confirmed that the activities of Krishna are divine. And this basic principle is presented in the Bhagavad Gita also, where Krishna himself says, Janma karma chamedhi vyam. My janma, my appearance, my karma, my activities are divyam. They are completely spiritual. And somebody who understands the nature of my activities, my birth, will never have to be born again in this material world. So just by understanding the spiritual nature of Krishna's activities, and his birth, or his appearance, understanding, like Prabhupada says, that just like the sun, somebody who's ignorant, might think, oh, the sun is dead, and tomorrow a new sun is born. But actually it's the same sun, reincarnating, you could say. So in a similar way, the soul, the Atma, always reincarnates. Of course, we have to change bodies, and we are conditioned every time according to our karma. Whereas Krishna is completely free. He appears also again and again. Krishna says in the Gita, the only difference is, Arjuna, that I remember all my previous births, whereas you are forgetful. So, yes, understanding the transcendental nature of Krishna's qualities is in itself enabling us to enter transcendence. And I'll try to find this section in the purport where Srila Prabhupada is summarizing this, basically the first line of this verse. I think it's here. Energy and the energetic are non-different. So the energy and the energetic, that means we are energy, we are, Jiva Tattva, we are Shakti of Krishna, and he's the energetic, he's the source of all energies. So the energy and the energetic are non-different. Therefore, energies possesses the same quality as the energetic. Persons who are in full knowledge of the personality of Godhead, analyzing his different energies and knowing their own constitutional position, are certainly very, very dear to the Lord. So that's how Prabhupada is explaining it. that we are conscious of our qualitative equality with the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada explains it also in the third canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and also in some conversations you will see Srila Prabhupada saying that we are one in love with Krishna. You know, when you love somebody, you become one. You know? Why? Because you think the same way, you know, and your desires are the same. You know? And we actually pray every morning that our mind's disposition, you could say our desires, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, might become one with the desires of the Guru. You know? So chitete koriya aikya. You know? So may our chitta, our consciousness, become one, you know, with the mind, the desires of the spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, for example, for us. Or Krishna ultimately. So Srila Prabhupada describes it like that in the third canto, that when our desires are not anymore divergent or different, you know, from the desires of Krishna, we become one with Krishna. You know? One in desire, one in purpose, you know. And in that sense, we are one also. So one in quality, one in desire, one in purpose. But of course, always we are aware that He is the energetic, we are the energy, and we understand our constitutional position. So that's a very powerful word, you could say, or powerful terminology Srila Prabhupada developed, our constitutional position. So constitutional position means something that is very natural to us. This is not something external, you know, something that we imagine. It's our constitutional position. It's our nature, dharma. You know? So dharma could be described as the constitutional quality, nature, or position of something or somebody, you know, or a situation. You know? That is dharma. Dharma is that which is natural. Like, for example, Srila Prabhupada says that the dharma of fire would be, you know, heat or light. You know? The dharma of water is wetness, you know, and liquidity, and so on and so forth. So our dharma, our constitutional position is very clear. You know? We are Jivera Swarupahaya Krishnera Nityadhas. You know? Tatashta Shakti Bheda Abheda Prakash. We are a manifestation of Krishna's marginal energy, and we are eternal servants of Krishna. Krishnera Nityadhas. That is our nature, eternally. So the more we understand this, we can understand that actually everything we're experiencing right now in this material world is only a transitory, you could say, distraction, a transitory delusion. By nature, eternally, we are servants of Krishna. So it's only a question of remembering. You know? So Srila Prabhupada said, going back to Godhead, you know? Returning to where we already have been, you know, reminding ourselves of something we already have within us. And Srila Prabhupada used very often also the analogy of the lost son, you know, the lost son who. And actually this story, there's many real stories like this. I read about one story like that. In the 70s especially, from Europe and America, so many young people were drawn to India. You know? And many were drawn for, you know, they were seeking truth, knowledge. Of course, many devotees also went to India. But many, of course, also got very confused, you know, in India. India is very big, you know. When you think you figured out life, and then you come for the first time to India, then you realize you haven't seen anything yet. Because in India you will see everything, you know, very fast, very obvious, on your face, you know, good and evil, beautiful and gross, you know. So many people, so many things going on. So many young people actually got lost in India, you know. They start taking drugs, you know, they thought maybe that's a way to gain realization. And there will be plenty of crooks who tell you, yes, you take this nice, you know, substance and you will get some realization. And there's quite a few stories of, you know, parents traveling to India to see the Taj Mahal or something, and then they find their son begging on a railway station, you know. Completely forgot who he is, you know. He has parents in a wealthy country. So Prabhupada often talks about it, you know, that it happens, you know, that a son might forget, you know, I have a wealthy father, you know, I have a good home and family. You forget, you know, in ignorance, and you end up begging, you know. So when this, you know, when the parents see their son, they rescue him and then reinstate it, you know, in his position. So that analogy Prabhupada is using very often to describe our position. You know, we are forgetful of our true nature, and we need to realize we are of the same quality. You know? So that's that's the meaning of, we have the same wealth, so to say. We have the same spiritual nature. You know? We don't need to suffer. We don't need to live in a temporary world. You know? Reality is eternal, and only through material ignorance and forgetfulness we are trapped in a situation that actually is opposed to the definition of life in the Vedas. So I'll finish with that. So the Vedas describe that life is Sat Chit Ananda. And our modern materialistic perspective on life would be, life is, you know, a reaction of chemical, biological, you know, physical reactions. You know, it's a combination of those reactions that make up life. You know? That's the general, you could say, simple definition of life according to modern science, which is of course referring only to the gross material body. You know? It's not even touching psychology. You know? And you could say that this is the main value of the Vedas. And interestingly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also talked about it, that the value in the Vedas is that there is a red thread from beginning to end. You know? Whereas if you study in modern sciences or in modern universities, each field of study is actually at odds with another field of study. You know? Do you know about that? Of course, even within one field of study, they might have some, you know, different opinions. But for sure, psychologists have a different idea, you know, about what life is or consciousness than biologists, you know, or physicists, you know. All of these different disciplines are at odds in their conclusions. You know, they don't match up. You know? Whereas the definition we find in the Vedas is congruent. You know, it's inclusive. So when Krishna talks about Pakridina Ashtada, so 8 elements that are his material energy, it's everything included. You know, the gross science of the yantra, the body, the machine we are working with, the doshas, you know, Sankhya Yoga, then also ventures into the connection between the mind and the senses. You know, and that's very often missed. You know, if you just go by biology, there's no love, there's no emotions. You know, it's just biology. It's all just biology. You know. But the moment you have a connection between the subtle and the gross, the more holistic it becomes. And of course, we have the connection between the three. We have a very clear explanation how the body works. We have a clear explanation how the mind, you know, is involved with the body, how the impressions of the body affect the mind, how controlling the mind can, you know, improve our lives, and ultimately how all this energy, desire, power, personality, you know, seeking of happiness, ultimately is the consciousness of the soul, you know, animating everything. So, yes, the definition of life, of course, in the Vedas is Sat Chit Ananda. And we are trapped in a reality that is the opposite. It's Asat, Achit, and Nirananda. And it's not our nature. It's not natural for us, and we can see it. You can make a whole lecture just talking about those 3, but in short you can say that we aspire for Satchidananda. We want something that is lasting, consistent. We don't like it when things break. You know, you buy something new, you know, and has guarantee, and within a day you realize, I think I need to give it back. You know, very annoying. You know, And of course, we want knowledge, we are curious, we want to understand, and we want happiness. So Satchidananda is the real meaning or the real definition of life. And that's where we belong, you could say. Okay, I'll stop now. Maybe there are some questions or comments, corrections, something somebody might want to add. Okay, if not, Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Gauda Bhaktarinda ki jai.